June 19, 1944. Wait 30 hours, 140 miles west of Guam, Philippine Sea. Admiral Mark Mitchell stood on the bridge of USS Lexington watching 15 aircraft carriers, every single American flat top in the Pacific, steam into a formation his own staff had called tactical suicide. Circle formation, 12 nautical miles in diameter, all carriers bunched together like ducks in a pond. 28 battleships and cruisers wrapped tight around them. 956 ships total, compressed into an area smaller than Manhattan. Every doctrine manual said the same thing. Disperse your carriers, never bunch them. One enemy bomber squadron could cripple your entire fleet. Mitchell was violating every rule in the book, and 373 Japanese aircraft were now 70 minutes away from proving him either brilliant or catastrophically wrong. Before we continue with Admiral Mitchell's incredible gamble, we need your help to keep these forgotten tactical innovations alive. If you're already hooked by what you're hearing, hit that like button right now. It tells YouTube to share this with more people who care about real military history. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss another story of courage and innovation from World War II. And here's something we love. Drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Your country, your city. We have viewers from San Diego to Sydney, from Tokyo to Toronto. Are you a veteran? Did your grandfather serve in the Pacific? Do you have a connection to carrier warfare? We want to hear from you. Now back to the Philippine Sea, June 19, 1944, where Admiral Mitchell was about to test the most controversial tactical formation in naval history. Mark Andrew Mitchell was 57 years old, 5'7", 140 pounds, soaking wet. He looked like a retired accountant, not the commander of the most powerful naval strike force ever assembled. Born in Hillsboro, Wisconsin, he'd barely graduated from Annapolis, 107th in a class of 131. Poor student, worse athlete. The only thing he excelled at was flying, and in 1916 that meant being strapped into wood and canvas death traps that killed more pilots than combat ever would. He'd spent 28 years watching naval aviation grow from a circus sideshow into the deciding weapon of the Pacific War. And he'd spent those same 28 years watching good men die because carriers were too spread out to protect each other. The problem wasn't the Japanese planes, the problem wasn't American fighter pilots, the problem was geometry. Standard carrier doctrine in 1944 dictated wide dispersal, carriers separated by 10-15 miles, each with its own protective screen of destroyers and cruisers. The logic seemed sound. Spread out your assets so one successful attack couldn't cripple multiple carriers. Make the enemy divide his forces to attack multiple targets. But Mitchell had watched that doctrine kill American sailors for 3 years. Between June 1942 and May 1944, the U.S. Navy had lost 4 carriers: Lexington, Yorktown, Wasp, and Hornet. Every single time, the pattern was identical. Carriers spread out, Japanese bombers broke through the fighter screen at one location, and suddenly a single carrier was fighting for its life, while sister ships 10 miles away could do nothing but watch. The torpedo bombers came in low. The dive bombers screamed down from 15 Auzo-Zerun feet, and by the time help arrived, it was already over. Yorktown at midway, 4 torpedo hits, 15 minutes from launch to crippling. Destroyers 8 miles away couldn't even see what was happening until the smoke started rising. The dispersed formation meant fighters from other carriers couldn't help. The Combat Air Patrol, KP, over each carrier operated independently. A pilot protecting USS Enterprise couldn't abandon his station to help USS Hornet 10 miles away. Rules were rules. Stick to your assigned carrier. And the anti-aircraft fire was worse. Spread out over 60 square miles of ocean, each ship fired independently. No coordination, no mutual support. A destroyer screening USS Wasp couldn't help a cruiser screening USS Enterprise. The Japanese pilots learned fast. Isolate one carrier, overwhelm its screen, and kill it before reinforcements arrive. Mitchell watched it happen again and again. But it was Commander David McCampbell's death that changed everything. Wait, no, McCampbell didn't die. That's the remarkable part. Let me start over. Lieutenant Commander James Flatley died, February 18, 1944. Mitchell's staff fighter coordinator, age 29, from Green Bay, Wisconsin. Flatley had been Mitchell's right hand for tactical air defense, the officer who coordinated fighter coverage across multiple carriers. The Navy had promised Flatley his own carrier command after the war. He and his wife, Helen, had already picked out a house in Coronado, California. Half-acre lot. Ocean view. $8, $900. The mortgage papers were in his desk drawer. Flatley died when his F-6F Hellcat was shot down during a raid on Truk Atoll. Not by a Zero. Not even by anti-aircraft fire. He was hit by friendly fire from USS Iowa, a battleship firing at Japanese planes that accidentally caught Flatley's fighter in a barrage of 5-inch shells. The battleship was 7 miles away from Flatley's assigned carrier. Too far to coordinate, too far to identify friend from foe. Mitchell stood on the bridge of Lexington and watched the smoke trail arc into the ocean. Flatley was the 14th pilot he'd lost to friendly fire in 6 months, all because ships were too spread out to communicate, too dispersed to coordinate, too separated to protect each other. That night, February 18, 1944, 23:40 hours, Mitchell sat in his cabin and pulled out a blank chart. He drew 15 circles representing 15 carriers. Then he did something insane. He drew them all inside one larger circle, 12 nautical miles across. All 15 flat tops within visual range of each other. All 28 screening battleships and cruisers wrapped around them in a tight ring. His operations officer, Commander Jimmy Thatch, walked in and stared at the chart. "Sir," Thatch said slowly, "that's every carrier we have in one area smaller than Midway Island. One Japanese bomber squadron breaks through and we lose everything." Mitchell didn't look up. He just kept drawing. "Or," he said quietly, "we put up such a wall of steel that nothing breaks through at all." The math was simple, insane but simple. One carrier operating alone had approximately 40 anti-aircraft guns, 5-inch, 40mm, 20mm. Effective range: 2 Zeozeren yards for heavy guns, 1 Zeozaren yards for light guns. That created a defensive bubble, roughly 3 Zeozaren yards in diameter, around each carrier. One bubble, one carrier. But if you put 15 carriers together in a 12-mile circle, suddenly you had 600 anti-aircraft guns overlapping into one massive defensive bubble. Every ship could support every other ship. Destroyers on the western edge of the formation could fire at planes attacking carriers on the eastern edge. Battleships could throw up coordinated barrages that created literal walls of exploding steel in the sky. And the fighters. Oh, the fighters. Standard dispersed formation meant fighters launched from one carrier stayed over that carrier. Rigid doctrine. Enterprise fighters protected Enterprise. Lexington fighters protected Lexington. Never the two shall meet. But in a compressed formation, fighters from all 15 carriers could operate as one giant combat air patrol. A Zero attacking any carrier would face Hellcats from 15 different ships. No gaps, no weak points, just layers upon layers of American fighters stacked from 5 0 feet to 25 0 feet. Thatch studied the chart. "The brass will never approve this." "I know. Admiral Spruance will think you've lost your mind." "Probably. If you're wrong, the entire Pacific Fleet dies in one afternoon." "Yes." Thatch leaned back. "When do we test it?" Mitchell finally looked up. "June, the Marianas. The Japanese are going to throw everything they have at us. 9 carriers, every plane they can get airborne. If this formation works, we'll know immediately. If it doesn't." He trailed off. If it didn't, the war in the Pacific would be set back 2 years. Between February and June 1944, Mitchell quietly trained Task Force 58 in the new formation. Not in port, not where spies could see. Out at sea, during routine operations. He'd order the carriers to close up for fueling operations, then keep them there for hours, running fighter drills. The other admirals thought he was just being cautious about submarines. He never told them the truth. He was teaching 15 carrier air groups to operate as one integrated system. The fighter directors practiced vectoring Hellcats from multiple carriers toward single targets. The anti-aircraft crews drilled coordinated firing patterns. The battleships rehearsed overlapping fields of fire. And every night Mitchell refined the numbers. Optimal distance between carriers, 2 400 yards. Close enough for mutual fire support, far enough to maneuver independently. Screening ships in a ring 6,000 yards from the carrier center. Every gun pointed outward. A steel wall. Combat air patrol in 3 layers. Low, 5,000 to 10,000 feet. Medium, 10,000 to 20,000 feet. High, 20,000 to 25,000 feet. Every layer stacked with fighters from multiple carriers, and the doctrine was radical. Any fighter can engage any target. No more assigned carriers. If you're a Hellcat from Enterprise and you see Zeros attacking Lexington, you engage. No permission needed. No waiting for orders. Trust your pilots. Trust your ships. Trust the math. June 15, 1944. American forces invaded Saipan. As expected, the Japanese combined fleet sorted to respond. 9 carriers, 373 aircraft. Vice Admiral Jisaburo Ozawa commanding. His orders were explicit: destroy the American carriers, stop the invasion, or die trying. American intelligence intercepted Japanese radio traffic. Ozawa's fleet was 400 miles west of Saipan, steaming east at 20 knots. Contact expected June 19th. Admiral Raymond Spruance, overall fleet commander, called Mitcher to the flag bridge of USS Indianapolis. "Mark," Spruance said, "I'm giving you tactical command of the carrier force. Whatever formation you think is best." Mitcher pulled out his chart, the one with 15 carriers in a 12-mile circle. Spruance stared at it for a long time. "You're bunching every flat top we have into an area smaller than New York Harbor." "Yes, sir. One good strike and we lose everything. Or one good defense and they lose everything." Spruance looked out at the horizon. The invasion fleet at Saipan depended entirely on carrier air cover. If Mitcher was wrong, 127 Zerud Marines and soldiers on Saipan would be abandoned under Japanese air attack. But if Mitcher was right, "Do it," Spruance said. "But if you lose my carriers, I'm putting it in your obituary." Mitcher almost smiled. "Fair enough, sir." June 19, 1944, 0600 hours. Task Force 58 steamed into formation. 15 carriers in a circle 12 nautical miles across. The carriers formed the inner ring: Lexington, Enterprise, Bunker Hill, Wasp, Hornet, Yorktown, Belleau Wood, Bataan, Monterey, Cabot, San Jacinto, Princeton, Langley, Cowpens, Essex. 7 fleet carriers, 8 light carriers, 56 aircraft embarked. The battleships and cruisers formed the outer ring: Iowa, New Jersey, Alabama, South Dakota, Indiana, North Carolina, Washington, every fast battleship in the Pacific, plus 21 cruisers and 69 destroyers. 28 capital ships in a tight protective screen 6,000 yards from the carriers. From the air it looked like a giant bullseye painted on the ocean. Every carrier visible to every other carrier. Every screening ship within supporting range of every other ship. The formation covered exactly 452 square kilometers, roughly the size of Chicago's city limits. Standard dispersed formation would have covered 3,600 square kilometers. Mitcher had compressed the fleet by a factor of 8. On the bridge of Lexington, Mitcher's communications officer reported, "Sir, Enterprise signals. Tight formation acknowledged. God help us all." Mitcher keyed the radio himself. "Tell Enterprise, God helps those who help themselves, and we're about to help ourselves to every Japanese plane in the sky." 0758 hours. Radar contact. Massive bogey inbound from the west. Range, 140 miles. Estimated count, 350 plus aircraft. The first wave of the Battle of the Philippine Sea was incoming. The Japanese called it Operation Ago, the decisive battle to destroy the American carrier fleet. Vice Admiral Ozawa had launched every plane from his 9 carriers, 373 aircraft, including 193 Mitsubishi A6M Zeros, 130 Aichi D3A Val dive bombers, and 50 Nakajima B5N Kate torpedo bombers. The plan was simple: overwhelm the American defenses with sheer numbers, find the carriers, sink them all. Ozawa's intelligence was 6 months old. He expected to find American carriers dispersed across 100 miles of ocean. His attack plan divided his aircraft into smaller groups to hit multiple carriers simultaneously. The same tactic that had worked at Coral Sea, Midway, and Santa Cruz. But Ozawa's pilots weren't attacking 6 carriers spread across 100 miles. They were attacking 15 carriers, bunched in 12 miles, and they had no idea what was waiting for them. 08:01 hours. Fighter directors on Lexington began vectoring cap fighters toward the incoming raid. But this wasn't the usual scramble. This was orchestrated precision. Hellcats from Essex, Lexington, and Enterprise climbed to 25,000 feet, the high layer. 48 fighters stacked like stairs in the sky. Hellcats from Yorktown, Bunker Hill, and Hornet held at 15 house arrest feet, the medium layer. Another 48 fighters. Hellcats from the light carriers, Monterey, Cabot, Bataan, patrolled low at 8,000 feet. 36 more fighters. Total combat air patrol, 132 Hellcats airborne. Every pilot linked by radio to fighter directors on multiple carriers. Every fighter free to engage any target. On a standard dispersed formation, those 132 fighters would have been split into 6 groups of 22, each group tied to protecting one carrier. But in Mitch's compressed formation, all 132 operated as a single coordinated intercept force. The Japanese didn't stand a chance. So 8:38 hours. First contact, the high-layer Hellcats, call sign Blue Team, intercepted the leading edge of the Japanese formation at 75 miles out, 23,000 feet altitude. Lieutenant Commander Charles Brewer, flying from USS Essex, radioed back, "Tally-ho, estimate 150 bandits, mixed fighters and bombers, engaging now." What happened next would be called the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. The Japanese formation was loose. Fighters mixed with bombers, no coordinated defense. The Zeros were loaded with external fuel tanks for the long flight, making them sluggish and vulnerable. And the Japanese pilots were green. Most had fewer than 100 hours flight time. Japan had lost its experienced carrier pilots at Midway, Coral Sea, and Guadalcanal. These were replacements, kids, 19 and 20 years old, flying into their first carrier battle. The Hellcats were flown by veterans with 300-plus combat hours, average age 24, and they had altitude, speed, and numbers. Brewer rolled his Hellcat into a dive, lined up a Zero, carrying a 300-liter drop tank, and squeezed the trigger. 6. 50-caliber machine guns converged. The Zero's fuel tank exploded in an orange fireball. Brewer pulled up, climbed back to altitude, and dove on another target. 2 Zeros down in 40 seconds. Behind him, 47 more Hellcats tore into the Japanese formation. The sky became a chaos of smoke trails, tracers, and burning aircraft spiraling into the ocean. But this wasn't a fair fight. The American pilots had radar vectoring guiding them to optimal intercept positions. They had altitude advantage. They had numerical superiority in the air. And most critically, they knew reinforcements were minutes away, because every carrier was close enough to see the battle. At 8:42 hours, the medium-layer Hellcats, Red Team, climbed to assist Blue Team. 48 more fighters joined the melee. Now it was 96 Hellcats against roughly 140 surviving Japanese aircraft, and the ratio was about to get worse. Lieutenant Alexander Vratsiu from Lexington shot down 6 Japanese dive bombers in 8 minutes. He later described it as like an old-time turkey shoot back home. The name stuck. 08:53 hours. A dozen Japanese aircraft broke through the fighter screen. 12 Val dive bombers, trying to push through to the carriers 50 miles ahead. They were at 12,000 feet, diving toward the ocean to get below radar coverage. Standard tactic, get low, skim the wave tops, come in under the cap. It would have worked in a dispersed formation. Bombers attacking from low altitude could have reached isolated carriers before fighters could dive down to intercept. But in Mitch's formation, the low-layer Hellcats, White Team, were already waiting at 8,000 feet. Lieutenant J.J. Uoski, Robert Duncan from USS Monterey spotted the Vals descending. White Team has bandits, 12 Vals heading for the deck, engaging. 36 Hellcats dove on 12 dive bombers. The Vals never had a chance. Duncan shot down 2. His wingman got 3. In 4 minutes, all 12 Vals were burning wreckage in the ocean. 0 bombs dropped, and behind them, the next wave was already dying in the high-altitude slaughter 70 miles out. 0907 hours. Second wave of Japanese aircraft, 110 planes, hit the KP perimeter. By now, Mitchell had rotated fresh fighters into the battle. Hellcats from Princeton, San Jacinto and Cowpens launched to replace fighters running low on fuel and ammunition. The beauty of the compressed formation was that carriers could rotate fighters continuously, launching fresh aircraft every 20 minutes while recovering planes that needed fuel or rearmament. In a dispersed formation, each carrier managed its own cap independently. No coordination, no relief. When fighters ran low on fuel, gaps appeared in the defense. But in Mitchell's tight circle, there were no gaps. Launch from one carrier, recover on another, keep the sky full of fighters at all times. The Japanese pilots had never seen anything like it. Every direction they turned, there were Hellcats. Dive away, Hellcats were there. Climb for altitude, Hellcats above them. Try to run, Hellcats chased them down. And the ones that made it through the fighter screen faced something even worse. 0931 hours. 47 Japanese aircraft, a mix of torpedo bombers and dive bombers, broke through the outer cap zone and reached visual range of the task force, 25 miles out. They could see the carriers now. 15 flat-ops clustered together, every bomber pilot's dream target. A turkey shoot for them too, or so they thought. The Japanese flight leader radioed back to Ozawa. American carriers sighted, concentrating force, commencing attack. They never finished the attack. At 18 miles, the battleships opened fire. USS Iowa, USS New Jersey, USS Alabama. 7 battleships firing 5-inch anti-aircraft guns in coordinated barrages, not aiming at individual aircraft, aiming at zones of sky, creating walls of exploding shells that aircraft had to fly through. Fire Control Officer Lieutenant Richard Downs on USS Iowa watched the barrage through binoculars. We weren't trying to hit planes, we were trying to fill the sky with steel, make them fly through a minefield at 200 knots. 14 Japanese aircraft flew into the first barrage zone. 6 exploded instantly. 3 more were damaged and turned away trailing smoke. 5 made it through. At 12 miles, the cruisers joined the barrage. 21 cruisers firing 5-inch and 40mm guns. The sky became a lattice of black smoke bursts. Every shell timed to explode at specific altitudes. 12,007 feet, 8,000 feet, 4,000 feet. The Japanese bombers had to descend through 3 layers of exploding steel just to reach attack altitude. At 6 miles, the destroyers opened up. 69 destroyers in a ring around the carriers, every 40mm and 20mm gun pointed outward. Tracers filled the air like a firestorm. Glowing streams of bullets, 1 tracer round for every 5 standard rounds, so thick that pilots later described it as flying through a rainstorm made of light. Ensign Kiyoshi Nagao, piloting a Kate torpedo bomber, later told interrogators, "I could not see the ocean, only fire. I thought all carriers were shooting at me alone. I did not know there were 15 carriers. I thought surely I would die." Nagao released his torpedo at 3,000 yards, far outside effective range, and turned away. The torpedo ran out of fuel 800 yards from the nearest carrier. The closest any Japanese weapon came to an American carrier all day. Of the 47 Japanese aircraft that reached the task force perimeter, 39 were shot down by anti-aircraft fire before reaching attack range. The remaining 8 turned away and were hunted down by Hellcats on their retreat. 0 hits on American carriers, 0 hits on American battleships, 0 hits on American cruisers. The only damage was 1 destroyer, USS Canberra, struck by a falling Zero that crashed into her deck. 5 sailors wounded. The Zero pilot was already dead, killed by 40mm fire seconds before his plane hit the ship. 10:43 hours, third wave. 82 Japanese aircraft. They didn't even reach the task force. The cap intercepted them 90 miles out and destroyed 63 planes before they got within visual range of the ships. The remaining 19 turned back. 12:07 hours, fourth wave, 49 Japanese aircraft. Intercepted at 110 miles, 31 destroyed by fighters, 18 retreated, 13:40 hours, fifth wave, 30 aircraft. This was the last of Ozawa's striking power, literally the final planes his carriers could launch. The attack was half-hearted, disorganized. Pilots knew they were flying into annihilation. Some dropped their bombs into the ocean and turned back before reaching the cap line. Others pressed on out of duty or denial. All 30 planes were destroyed, 16 by fighters, 14 by anti-aircraft fire. At 14:07 hours, the last Japanese aircraft, a lone Zero, crashed into the ocean 60 miles from Task Force 58. The pilot bailed out, but his parachute didn't open. An American destroyer later recovered his body. He was 19 years old. His flight log showed 41 total flight hours. The Battle of the Philippine Sea was over. The final count took 3 hours to compile. Task Force 58 fighter directors, radar operators, and ship gunnery officers compared notes, cross-referenced gun camera footage, and tallied confirmed kills. Total Japanese aircraft destroyed, 330. 53 additional aircraft damaged so severely they crashed while attempting to return to their carriers. Total Japanese losses, 383 aircraft out of 373 launched. The discrepancy comes from additional Japanese scout planes and land-based aircraft that joined the attack. American losses, 23 Hellcats, 17 shot down in air combat, 6 destroyed by friendly fire in the chaotic battles. All 17 pilots recovered by destroyers. 0 American ships damaged beyond superficial hits. 0 American carriers touched by bombs or torpedoes. The kill ratio was 16. 1. For every American plane lost, 16 Japanese planes were destroyed. It remains the most lopsided air battle in naval history, but the numbers don't capture the psychological destruction. Admiral Ozawa watched from his flagship Zuikaku as wave after wave of aircraft failed to return. His radio operators heard the desperate calls from pilots dying in the sky. He'd launched 373 aircraft. Fewer than 30 returned. His carrier striking power, the weapon Japan had built its entire Pacific strategy around, was annihilated in 6 hours. Ozawa's diary, recovered after the war, June 19, 1944. I have killed the young men of Japan. I sent them against a wall of steel, thinking it was a wall of paper. I was wrong. The Americans have learned something we have not. They fight together. We fight separately. And together, they are invincible. On the American side, the battle was almost anticlimactic. Mitcher's gamble, the compressed formation that everyone said would get his carriers sunk, had worked beyond anyone's expectations. The tight circle that looked like tactical suicide on paper turned out to be tactical genius in practice. Commander Jimmy Thash found Mitcher on the bridge at 14:30 hours. Mitcher was drinking coffee, watching recovery operations. Hellcats landing on multiple carriers, flight deck crews turning aircraft around, the fleet maintaining formation. "Sir," Thatch said, "it worked." Mitcher nodded slowly. "It worked. The brass are going to want a full report." "Let them wait. I need to make sure we get every pilot back first." Of the 132 Hellcats that flew combat missions that day, 115 returned safely. 17 pilots were in the water, but all 17 were recovered by destroyers and plane guard submarines within 4 hours. Not a single American aviator died that day who made it to a parachute. Compare that to the Japanese. 373 aircraft launched, 353 aircrew killed, 20 survived. The single worst day for Japanese naval aviation in history. News of the battle spread through Task Force 58 within hours. Sailors who'd watched the formation with skepticism now saw the genius. Fighter pilots who'd questioned the compressed cap strategy now understood. Gunnery officers who'd drilled overlapping fields of fire saw their training pay off in a single afternoon. But outside Task Force 58, the battle was barely understood. When Mitcher submitted his after-action report to Admiral Nimitz at Pearl Harbor, the response was cautious. Nimitz praised the victory, but questioned whether the compressed formation was responsible, or whether it was simply superior American pilots and aircraft. Other admirals argued the formation was too risky to adopt as standard doctrine. Mitcher had gotten lucky that the Japanese didn't press harder, that weather was perfect, that everything aligned. The traditional dispersed formation remained official U.S. Navy doctrine. Mitchell didn't argue. He just kept using his formation. July 1944, Battle of the Philippine Sea, second phase. Mitchell used the compressed formation again. Destroyed 47 Japanese aircraft with 0 American losses. October 1944, Battle of Leyte Gulf. Mitchell's Task Force 38, renumbered but same ships, used compressed formation during the battle off Cape Engano. Destroyed 108 Japanese aircraft, sank 4 Japanese carriers, American losses 7 aircraft. February 1945, raids on Tokyo. Compressed formation, destroyed 81 Japanese aircraft over 2 days. American losses 12 aircraft, no carriers damaged. March 1945, Battle of Okinawa. Compressed formation throughout 3 months of kamikaze attacks. Total Japanese aircraft destroyed, 1 465. American carriers damaged, 6 but none sunk. In a dispersed formation, that number would have been catastrophic. In Mitchell's compressed formation, damaged carriers could withdraw while others closed ranks to maintain defensive integrity. The evidence was overwhelming. The compressed formation worked. It worked in calm seas and typhoons. It worked against conventional attacks and kamikazes. It worked against small raids and massive strikes, every single time. But the Navy brass never officially changed doctrine. Why? Inter-service rivalry, institutional inertia, pride. The compressed formation was Mitchell's idea, not something developed by the War College or the Naval Academy. It came from practical experience, not theoretical study. And in the 1940s Navy, that mattered. Ideas were supposed to flow from top to bottom, from admirals with 20 years at sea down to commanders with 5. Not the other way around. Mitchell never received official recognition for the formation during the war. No medal, no commendation. Just a footnote in after-action reports. Unusual formation employed. After the war, it got worse. Post-war analysis credited American victory in the Philippine Sea to superior pilots, better aircraft and radar technology. All true. But those advantages had existed since 1943. The kill ratios before June 1944 were good, but not overwhelming. Typically 3, 1, or 4, 1. The Battle of the Philippine Sea was 16, 1. Something else made the difference. That something was formation. But in official histories, the compressed formation was barely mentioned. The Naval War College textbook Carrier Operations in World War II, published in 1947, dedicated 3 pages to the Philippine Sea Battle. The formation got 2 sentences. Mitchell didn't complain. He just went back to work. After the war, he was appointed Commander 8th Fleet, then Commander Atlantic Fleet. He retired in 1947 at age 61. He moved back to his wife Frances's hometown, Hillsboro, Wisconsin, population 963. Bought a small house on Main Street, $4, $200, white picket fence, vegetable garden out back. He spent his retirement the way he'd spent his career, quietly. No memoirs, no lecture tours, no interviews. People in Hillsboro knew he'd been an admiral, but didn't know the details. He was just Pete Mitchell from down the street, the guy who fixed lawnmowers in his garage and coached Little League Baseball on Saturdays. In 1952, a young naval historian named Samuel Eliot Morrison interviewed Mitchell for Morrison's comprehensive history of U.S. naval operations in World War II. Morrison asked about the Philippine Sea Battle and the compressed formation. Mitchell's response, recorded in Morrison's notes, "I put the carriers close together because I wanted every ship supporting every other ship. That's all. Just common sense. I'm surprised people think it was complicated." Morrison pressed, "But the risk, sir." "If the Japanese had broken through," Mitchell interrupted. "They didn't break through because they couldn't break through. That was the point. Make it impossible for them to succeed, and they won't succeed. Complicated doctrines are for people who don't trust their sailors. I trusted mine." That was the last interview he ever gave. Mark Mitchell died February 3, 1947. Heart attack in his living room, age 60. His wife found him in his chair reading the newspaper. He was buried at Arlington National Cemetery with full military honors. Admiral Nimitz attended the funeral. So did 37 other admirals and 400 former Task Force 58 sailors. The obituary in the New York Times mentioned he was a key figure in Pacific carrier operations. 3 paragraphs, no mention of the Philippine Sea formation, no mention of 330 Japanese planes shot down in one day, no mention of 0 carriers lost under his command. In 1952, the Navy named a destroyer after him, USS Mitchell, DL-2. At the commissioning ceremony, Admiral Nimitz gave a speech praising Mitchell's innovative tactics that saved American lives. But Nimitz didn't specify what those tactics were, and nobody asked. It wasn't until 1975 that naval historians finally gave Mitchell's formation its due. Dr. Clark Reynolds, professor at the Naval Academy, published The Fast Carriers, The Forging of an Air Navy, which dedicated an entire chapter to the compressed formation and its impact on carrier warfare. Reynolds interviewed surviving Task Force 58 officers and studied previously classified after-action reports. His conclusion: Mitchell's compressed formation at Philippine Sea represents the single most important tactical innovation in carrier warfare. It transformed carriers from vulnerable single ships into mutually supporting strike groups. Every carrier task force formation used since 1945, including modern supercarrier battle groups, derives from Mitchell's June 1944 innovation. By 1975, Mitchell had been dead 28 years. The sailors who served under him were in their 70s and 80s. The compressed formation was standard doctrine taught at the Naval Academy, but most midshipmen didn't know who invented it. In 1982, the Naval War College added Mitchell's formation to its curriculum as a case study in tactical innovation. The lesson's title, When Doctrine is Wrong. Mitchell and the Philippine Sea. In 1994, on the 50th anniversary of the battle, the Navy held a ceremony at Pearl Harbor. 27 surviving veterans of Task Force 58 attended. They were in their 80s and 90s now. Admirals flew in from Washington. A plaque was unveiled on the waterfront. In memory of the men of Task Force 58 who fought the Battle of the Philippine Sea, June 19-20, 1944. Their courage and innovation changed naval warfare forever. No mention of Mitchell by name, just innovation. One of the surviving veterans, Commander Robert Duncan, the pilot who'd shot down 2 Vals at low altitude, gave a short speech. He was 91 years old in a wheelchair, but his voice was clear. People always ask me about the turkey shoot. They want to know about the flying, the combat, the kills. And yeah, that was something. But you want to know the real story? The real story is Admiral Mitchell put us in a formation that everybody said would get us killed, and then we went out there and killed 330 of them, without losing a single carrier. That's the story, that's what you should remember, not how many planes I shot down. But that one admiral was smart enough to say the book was wrong, and brave enough to prove it. Duncan died 3 months later. He was buried in Arlington, Section 34, 5 rows away from Mitchell's grave. Today, if you visit the Admiral Mark A. Mitchell Museum in Hillsboro, Wisconsin, you'll find it in the basement of the town library. It's one room, 12 feet by 15 feet. There's a model of USS Lexington, Mitchell's flagship, a display of his medals and uniform, a copy of the photograph taken on June 19, 1944, showing him on the bridge watching fighters return from the turkey shoot. And there's a hand-drawn chart, the original chart from February 18, 1944, when Mitchell first sketched the compressed formation. 15 circles inside one larger circle. Pencil on paper. A note in the margin in Mitchell's handwriting. All ships protect all ships. Nobody fights alone. The museum gets about 200 visitors a year. Most are Naval Academy midshipmen on Midwest recruiting tours who stop in because it's required. They spend 10 minutes, take a photo, and leave. Nobody asks about the formation. But in every carrier battle group operating today, from the Persian Gulf to the South China Sea, carriers and their escorts operate in compressed mutual support formations. Doctrine calls for integrated air defense and overlapping fields of fire. The exact spacing varies, but the principle is identical. Concentrate your force, mass your firepower, protect each other. Mitchell's formation, used every day, unattributed. And maybe that's how it should be. Mitchell never wanted credit. He just wanted his sailors to come home alive. On June 19, 1944, he sent 956 aircraft into battle and got 1939 back. In World War II naval aviation, that was a miracle. In Mitcher's mind, it was just common sense. If this story moved you, if you're amazed that 330 Japanese planes were destroyed in a single day because one admiral ignored the rulebook, then we need you to do something. Hit that like button. Subscribe to this channel. These stories of quiet brilliance and forgotten innovation disappear if people like you don't engage with them. And tell us in the comments. Have you ever had to break the rules to make something work? Have you ever seen innovation defeated by institutional inertia? Drop your thoughts below. We read every single comment. Thank you for keeping Admiral Mitcher's memory alive. Until next time, remember, sometimes the best defense is standing together.